Welcome to Accounting High.
What's the difference between going over a tax return and going over investments?
The biggest adjustment has been the emotional side. I mean, on the tax, you do get some emotional topics, divorces, deaths. But on the advisor side of things, we tend to dive deeper because we need to understand why people want to do certain things to ensure that we build a plan that fits into it. I'm an accountant. I'm not the poster child for being able to show empathy. That's honestly been the biggest challenge.
Hi, class is in session. It's time for Shoperations at accounting. Hi, class is in session. It's time for Shoperations at accounting. Hi, kids. Hybrid teams, for Pete's sake. I'm trying to manage through screens, but I can't figure out which Zoom window's my next meeting. Well, since 2012, my firm's been in the cloud. Join us as we go deep. I'll try not to run it to the ground. We're sharing profit and loss and managing back office. The tax staff just quit. Tried to hire on LinkedIn, no luck. And scope creep, team count, CAS, automate tax, compliance transactions, ID and bottlenecks. Come on, ops. Scotty, wait a minute. It's my firm, dog. I know, and I said you could run it however you want.
Introducing the star of our show,
Scotty and Matthew the Kidd.
We're gonna have a problem here.
What's up, homie? You're like Billy the Kid.
That joke may have ended a couple of relationships because I always threatened that our first kid had to be William Theodore.
Aha.
So there was kind of a workaround to Billy the Kid. First, I just want to say, I kind of feel like I'm finally at the cool kids table being on this podcast. Like, I think that was the first time I actually watched the intro as opposed to listening to the podcast and seeing all the faces on there.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I finally made it.
Well, you are a kid. I mean, you'll always be the kid, so you're at the cool kids table. I mean, I love it. Matthew Kidd, a CPA and a PFS. Students, you're in for a treat today. We've got one of 3 CPA siblings, all sons of CPAs. We're going back today, students. We're going back to the Sons of CPAs with Matthew Kidd. Matthew runs his own practice, approaching $1 million practice, very close. He's got 2 brothers who also have CPA practices and a father who has a CPA practice. That's 4 separate practices within one family. You would think that there would be some kind of family business, but we'll get into that. We're also going to get into wealth management and talk about the value of a tax practitioner adding wealth management to their practice. Matthew, I want to first talk about, I think I know the answer to this already. I think our students can kind of guess the answer, how you even became a CPA. But as the son of a CPA, I would like to know, did you think you had a choice here in the matter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I'd originally, going back to like junior high, I was going to be a doctor because I wanted to make a lot of money. Then I dissected a frog in 8th grade and threw up when I was dissecting the frog. So I figured that probably wasn't the path for me. And then really starting in high school, like early high school, late junior high, just had really honest and open conversations with my dad around the dinner table, especially being the youngest in the family. It was just me and my parents, so we didn't have anybody else to catch up on. So we had a chance to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly of the public accounting life. And after hearing all of that, I was like, I can't think of a better thing to do. And ultimately, like most of my decisions, I make them to be able to pivot at some point. And becoming a CPA seemed like the best option to be able to pivot if I didn't like what I was doing. Fortunately, I do.
Did you have the same mindset as your brothers? What's the age difference with the 3 siblings?
Yeah, so we're roughly like 2 to 3 years apart each.
Who decided to become a CPA first?
So actually, coincidentally, we all got licensed in the same year.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the oldest one started out as an engineer, switched to accounting, did a little victory lap at college. Other one was a hospitality business major at Michigan State. Then he got out, had his dream job working for the Detroit Red Wings for about a year. Quickly discovered, despite working for the Detroit Red Wings, you still had to close the bar at 2 o'clock in the morning for games and then still be back there at 9 o'clock in the morning to work special events the next day. So he went back and got his master's in accounting.
All right. you kind of made the decision and didn't pivot. They both pivoted. They both picked something else and pivoted. You made that decision and still haven't pivoted.
Right. I saw all their side quests and I was like, well, I might as well jump straight to the ending.
Dope. All right. Detroit, born and bred. All three of you guys still in the Detroit area?
We used to be spread across Michigan because I grew up in a small town, Frankenmuth, kind of mid-Michigan, little German tourist town. Had, I think, maybe 3,000 people. So now the rest of the family is back there. The middle bear just moved back to Frankenmuth from Traverse City.
All right.
So I'm the lone holdout.
And as you say that, I was going to use the three bears like analogy to this for your three brothers, but I think the three little pigs makes more sense, right? They were all brothers. The three bears, it was like the mama bear, the papa bear, and the baby bear, and then you had Goldilocks. So let's talk about the three little pigs here, right? One has his straw house, one has his house made of sticks, and one has his house made of bricks. And we're going to talk about the practices that you guys are building, you and your two brothers. But your dad, you guys grew up in a house where your dad was a CPA all your life. Did he always have a practice?
Yeah. So he was a partner in a large local firm. So
Okay.
I think at their peak, they had probably 50 employees, about 5 partners. And I'd say very much a traditional large local partnership in that if 2 partners wanted to do something one way and 3 partners wanted to do it the other way, you ended up with 2 different ways of doing things. They did
Still the case to this day.
Yeah.
In most partnerships.
It is. And I think that's largely where you see, kind of my brothers and I not being in one partnership, in that we recognize we have different ways of operating. And if we're not all going to row in the same direction, then we shouldn't all be in one practice. So that is kind of what we grew up with, seeing both the positives and negatives of that. Because, there are positives that come with being a bigger firm. So grew up with that. That's the model that we understood. When we started out our practices, we were all very much traditional models. And I think in many ways, we still are fairly traditional compared to what some of the younger firms are doing out there.
Well, a lot of younger firms are starting from scratch. They're not starting with an acquisition. You guys, all three acquired firms. In a way, you inherited what you acquired, not really knowing any better. Let's first talk about the makeup of the 3 firms, right? So all 3 of you guys got your CPAs the same year. Did you all acquire your first firms at the same time?
No, we did it actually, I believe 3 years in a row. There might have been a gap between one of them. But yeah, the oldest brother, he worked for a school district, and he just did taxes part-time for a sole proprietor in the area. Sole proprietor approached him about buying out the practice since there weren't any other CPAs that were on staff. So he went from being a seasonal preparer to buying the firm. And that was kind of whether it's a coincidence or God thing, whatever you want to call it. The seller was planning on doing like a long-term transition, like a 5-year seller finance transition. At the same time, my dad had retired taken his buyout from the CPA firm. So he was just working there part-time for a couple of years. And he was quickly getting tired of being an employee after having been the boss for 30 years.
Right.
So he said, well, if you want to expedite this, I can come over, help him with this practice. So that was how my brother got the first practice.
So your dad helped him?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Awesome. All right. And so that's the oldest. So now you got the oldest buys a practice, very traditional tax practice, doing a ton of returns, I'm sure.
Yep.
Okay. Your oldest had 2 acquisitions too. I don't know if we should also discuss that. He had a second one as well.
Yeah. So he bought another one, I think it's probably been 2 years ago. Relatively close geographically, similar in makeup, and it made sense to give it a shot. So basically expanded what his current practice type was. I should add our dad did, I think, 6 acquisitions while he was at his first firm, his first career, I call it.
If we're using the 3 little pigs analogy, you need a lot more straw to make a straw house than you would comparing that to bricks or sticks, right? You need a lot of straw. That's a lot of 1040s. And you could keep tacking those on and push it together and build that straw house. And that's what he's doing. But he's happy with it. He's got a roof over his head. I guess you don't really hear too many complaints from him because he's doing what he likes to do. He went into this knowing what he was going to get out of it, and he has a busy tax season, but he's probably cool this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, for him, he has 4 young kids, coaches their sports teams. They go on big vacations, or they spend 2-3 weeks in Colorado every summer. They spend another around like Thanksgiving, Christmas. They go out there for another couple of weeks. So they live I'd say a balanced life. And then tax season is tax season. And for that, he makes it happy. And you also end up with I think a big factor in what kind of practice you're building is whether you want to be client facing and client serving, or whether you want to be a firm owner. Brett's the oldest. I think he skews more to the firm owner, which that is a model where he can be relatively removed from the direct client interaction. Whereas I think Mark, the middle pig. So when you actually say middle pig, that sounds terrible. I'm not sure I can stick with that.
I didn't say it. You said it.
I'm not sure I can write
sorry,
that one
Mark.
out.
If Mark is listening, sorry. We haven't decided if Mark's middle pig is the house made of sticks yet, but why don't you enlighten us on what Mark is building?
So Mark is kind of at that point where he's at the kind of inflection point of whether you stick with being a sole proprietor model where
Stick,
you're
no
doing,
pun intended.
Maybe it was intentional. I'm not actually that smart. I couldn't work that in myself.
Subconscious.
So he's at that point where he's kind of going back and forth on whether to build something or to stick with the sole proprietor model. And I'd say of the 3 of us, he is definitely by far the best client service person.
Sure. He controls every aspect of the relationship.
Yeah.
So end to end, he is dealing with the clients, he's servicing them, he's helping them, and he's giving probably them white glove to a degree. When you're sole proprietor, you don't have to rely on anybody, and you can control the quality.
And generally speaking, I mean, he enjoys doing it.
Yeah.
He enjoys talking with the clients. So, I mean, that's kind of at that point of whether he wants to keep doing that or grow. So I think he's going to do what most people do and try their hand at growing, hiring some people and see how it goes. And then if you enjoy it, keep growing. If not, I mean, there's nothing wrong with pulling back and doing what you were doing before.
After you move on from a solo practitioner toward the next phase, it's a lot of work, and it's a different kind of work too. So you've entered this no man's land of building something and working more and managing people and building systems and processes so you can be that firm owner or business owner. It's going to be a rough journey because he's not going to have as much control over the product and the client service, and he's going to have to go through people. So if he's up for it and he's up for the challenge, it'll be a lot of work, but it could be more rewarding in the end too, because he'll get the best of both worlds. So he'll still get to deal with the clients, but he'll also be building a business, right?
Yeah, I thought you were going to drop into like a little Hannah Montana montage there. I mean, best of both worlds.
Yeah,
wasn't that the theme song?
It could be. I didn't like. I've got a couple other songs I could break into right now. It wouldn't be Hannah Montana, but I get it. Best of both worlds. Right now, he is pretty happy, and you said he's married too.
Yep.
Family. Yep.
Married with 2 Irish twins, which I'm learning not nearly as many people know what it is than I thought.
What's
it was.
an Irish twin?
2 kids born within a year of each other.
Oh,
so
wow.
He's got two boys that are 11 months apart, and they're 4 and 5. So he's busy.
Yeah. So you got middle bro who's sticking with the sticks, and then you've got youngest brother, first to decide he wanted to be a CPA. He made his decision, knowing he might be able to pivot. Still hasn't pivoted, and now he gets to build a practice on his own. $800,000 practice now. You did have an acquisition as well, like your other 2. You said you had about 60 CAS clients. You do about 1,000 returns. You've got an outsourced team in the Philippines, and you're also building out the wealth management. You don't have a family, so you're dedicating your time to this.
Or boating and vacations.
Okay. You still have your free time.
That's actually kind of from the last time we talked. I've got a better picture, and I mean it'll be interesting. We plateaued this year for the first time.
Plateaued.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's let our students in on the journey here. So now we're picking back up with Matt, the youngest piglet of the 3. building his house made of bricks. How did you get your first acquisition? Were you in line with your brothers? Were you the third acquisition of the three?
No, but I was the second.
Second? Okay.
Yeah. And basically it was, I'd worked for a couple of small firms out of college, and I was kind of at the point that I was banging my head against the wall saying like there had to be a better way. I mean, we were doing stuff with paperwork, papers. We wouldn't transition to QuickBooks Online. Like everything was on premise servers. So finally I got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm complaining about this enough. I got to try doing it myself. So a plan was I was either going to look for a part-time controller job, start a firm from scratch, or if a firm came up, buy one. Because as you know, I mean, it's not like there's 1,000 firms that are for sale at any given time. Especially 7 years ago, you didn't really have remote firms that were being sold. So You could only buy firms in the region that you were living in. So then one came up for sale in the area, went, met with the guy. At that point, I was 26. So needed a long-term transition. The seller wanted a long-term transition. It made sense.
And the seller was Blunden
Yep.
of what is now Blunden and Kidd, right?
Yep. He was looking to sell with a long-term employment agreement. So he ended up with a 5-year employment agreement with basically a step down in hours each year. Year one,
How's
he
that
worked.
going? What year are you on right now?
So this was actually year 7. So once the agreement ended, he stayed on, just does basically 1040 prep in tax season.
Okay. How's that going?
We're talking right now whether or not he's going to come back for next year or not. So we've got a plan in place, whether he decides to return or whether he doesn't return. Got a plan.
So you've done the acquisition, you've grown it. What size was it when you acquired it?
It was, actually pulled that up this morning, 375,000.
So you've
When
grew
I
it
bought
by
it.
about 500,000. Tell me about how you grew it or what you did to grow the practice.
So the first couple of years, I really did nothing because I was 26, thought I knew everything, then bought a practice and realized I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So spent 2 years trying to figure out what I was doing. And then from there, I mean, I think you always end up with, whether you start a practice from scratch or whether you're buying a practice, you've always got that initial kind of burst, whether it's from friends and family, people that you knew professionally. You always get kind of that initial boost. Like if you're starting a firm, you might get 150 grand from people that you just know. It's low hanging fruit. So I'd say early on, that was the big part. And then the second thing was, we've done consistent price increases. So when you look at the revenue increases, I mean, a big part of it is we've been 10 to 20% price increases for the last 5 years. With that, we've had I don't know if it is, I mean, it's churn. On the business side, we've only had 3 businesses that have left, not due to retirement. But
And that's when you say the business side, that's the CAS work
Yeah.
that you're doing too. So when you bought the practice, were you guys doing write-up or bookkeeping for the clients? Like I would say you're doing tax returns. So were you doing some of that to support it?
yeah, so that was, I mean, the nice part about my acquisition is that it was we've talked about this a little bit. The CAS is really just old school write-up and payroll. It was a write-up and payroll practice. So already about 80% of the business clients that they did were on a monthly service of accounting and payroll. It wasn't truly a fixed fee because they were billing when the work got done. So like you might do 3 months of accounting at once and send out a bill for 3 months. But it was
Exactly
already
how my
on the
practice
model.
was. Yeah, this was the same thing. And when people started using the phrase CAS, I was a little confused. I mean, you could add in other services outside of what we were doing, but for the most part, what we were doing, cash basis books for the tax return, that's CAS too. I felt like CAS was something else. Like you had to do accrual or you had to do bill pay, or there was some other unknowns that I didn't know about. But technically speaking, if you're not doing tax, the other stuff is going to be lumped together as CAS. As far as at this point, my understanding of the definition, would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I bought a CAS practice. I just didn't know what CAS was.
Okay, yeah. I remember those days. I didn't even know what write-up was. I had somebody like, and this was back in my 20s, early 20s, and somebody's asking me, do you know how to do write-up? and I blanked. I was like, and it was a small tax practice that was doing that. And I blanked, and he didn't hire me because I didn't know what write-up was. So let's talk about you looking at that part of the practice now. And did you modernize it? Did you do anything to change it? Was he doing after-the-fact payroll at the time?
All of the above. So he was on, I mean, honestly, a big reason that he sold is it was on the CSA, which is the Thomson Reuters predecessor to ACS, which I can't imagine anybody in their right mind has purchased in the last 5 years. But it was at the very last leg where Thompson had said, we're going to kill off CSA. We're going to kill off CSA for 2-3 years. Finally, it was to the point that they were actually killing it. And he had no idea how to transition those clients from CSA to ACS. So I think that was a big part of the sale. So that was my first kind of trial by fire. We had, I think, a 2-month window from the date of close to when CSA was getting dropped out of virtual office to convert all of the clients. That was recommended of like a 1 to 2 year process of conversion that we got it all done in about 6 weeks.
Do you know what I just realized? CSA, ACS, and CAS are all the same letters, just jumbled differently.
I mean, there's no way Thomson Reuters was confident enough to think of that.
So creative.
I mean,
no, it's probably using similar acronyms. There's somewhere accounting is the A in all of them, and maybe clients the C in all of them too. Who knows?
CSA was Creative Solutions Accounting because that was the company acquired by Thompson.
Creative Solutions was I remember that too, and we used it. I tried to automate as much as I could in that product, and this was before QuickBooks Online was even something that was worth using, and this was before I knew of Xero. Mm-hmm. We were using CSA. We had a proprietary platform for write-up before that, but CSA, it was good. CSA, ACS, it went to ACS, and then we were, I had some hotkeys, so you could type in like 3 letters, and it would autofill. So I would like set up all those and try to automate as much of it as I could, like codes. If you typed in the right code for something, it filled in, or you could pull in CSVs at one point too. Mm-hmm. It was the Wild West back then.
And like that was at that time, it was actually incredible because it was when everything was enclosed in a suite. So if you were on that CS Professional suite, everything was integrated with each other. So you had UltraTax talking to File Cabinet and CSA and Practice. And everything worked seamlessly.
CS, if you had a degree in Practice CS, you had to take 2 years of schooling just to learn how to use it.
I've still got a desktop version of Practice CS that I have to dive into every once in a while when I'm feeling curious.
It was very promising because if you had the right practice management system that worked and everything was aligned in your firm, it was like the holy grail if I could get that to work. And then I found Excello, which then ended up, we used Karbon after that, but Karbon and Excello were very similar. And then we never looked back. The only thing we use is the blue one now. For our students that are paying attention to Thomson Reuters, that use Thomson Reuters, the blue one is UltraTax. That's the only one we use now. A yellow one too. We still have some stuff in File Cabinet, but we're using ShareFile. The green one was CSA, ACS, and the red one was the Practice, right? Purple was Fixed Assets. I still love Fixed Assets. Fixed Asset CS.
See, I don't love Fixed Asset CS only because I know that if I have to go into Fixed Assets, it's because I've got some sort of screwy sale going on that I'm actually going to have to think hard about.
I liked it for the schedules and to add things in during the year. It was always a joy. Maybe just because I like the color purple. So let's talk about then your next steps to modernizing it. What did you do after?
Yeah. So, I mean, first thing was basically all new clients went on to QBO. So we weren't adding anybody to ACS. We do still run about 30 clients on ACS. We have a longtime accountant who came with the practice.
And they like it. They probably don't want to use QuickBooks.
She loves it. She's efficient enough that we wouldn't get a really dramatic increase in efficiency by shifting over to QBO. Just because, I mean, she's got the old lightning speed 10 key and knows all the quick keys that it's that side of the practice. I had a guy
exactly the same. He loved it and he still uses it. He now works at a different firm that uses it. So he gets to still use it.
And it fully runs on autopilot. Like I have absolutely nothing to do with that to speak of. She does all the work. She does
those are her 30
the
clients.
tax returns at the end of the year. I do a 5-minute review. I'll do some tax planning for him in November, December. But beyond that, she runs it on autopilot. So as long as she's working, it's staying.
This brings up a very important point on why the profession or the industry itself doesn't change for long periods of time. And if things stay still, or maybe people perceive everything as being behind because we're doing something. We found something that worked. We found a system that works. It doesn't require it doesn't require learning something new. You've already learned everything you need to learn up until that point. And the only thing new you have to learn is tax laws and other things, which keep coming at us. It seems to be every couple of years we got some new major tax law that we have to learn, and it's only increasing. I don't judge anybody for using old tech because it works, or people for using paper systems still because they have a system that works, that worked for 30 years. Why all of a sudden change it, upend and change it? Well, if you're going to sell your practice, it's going to have to be changed, but maybe let the next person change it, right? Like in some cases. I don't want to go on a rant about this, but in a lot of cases, it's not worth the pains of making all those changes for you, the person doing it every day, because she would probably quit if you made her change everything.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's I'm pretty sure she's working just because she enjoys it. Like, she doesn't need to work. And I mean, I at the end of the day, I'm making money off of not really doing
and your
anything.
Clients are happy. They're getting the same system. Whenever we used to make major changes too, clients would also not be that happy. And we did it a lot. Trust me, when I was involved in the firm, I was changing up our software all the time because somebody's selling you something new that's going to promise a better future. And I would love those promises, and I'd follow the train. And some of these software companies, they get you really early on because they grab you by the pain point and they pull you in. And sometimes it's not very promising, and the results aren't.
Did you get pulled into the Onvio promise?
Onvio didn't have to pull me in. Maybe their marketing did, but I wanted to go. I wanted to go into the Onvio, but they didn't even let me. There was no way to even see what it did. It was just so vague. It was like, this is going to all be in the cloud. Okay, what's going to be in the cloud? Like, is it UltraTax? And no, there is no UltraTax. We don't have pricing for that yet. And this was years ago. This was, I forgot, when they first started announcing it.
Yeah, it was
so
like 2019-ish, I think, was when they actually started selling the documents.
So for our students, when you're on Thompson Reuters, they were also advertising the future, their new cloud system, and that's Onvio. And a lot of people still could be on Onvio. I think you are, right? There we go. So tell me, what happened? What is Onvio?
So Onvio was, in theory, exactly what you said. It was going to be a full cloud-based system that replaced all of the apps in the CS Professional Suite that were being housed in Virtual Office. So you were going to have your Onvio Documents, Onvio Practice Management, Onvio Tax, Onvio Assets, Onvio Accounting. The first little piggy to die was Onvio Accounting, because they were like, we already failed at ACS. We're just going to let QBO have this.
QuickBooks and Xero's already out there. So
we're not going to win this battle. But, I mean, Onvio Documents was solid from the client-facing side. So at the time we switched, we were running the old CS client portals, which that was a trip. Like, it's one thing for us to log into software from the 90s, but when we have a client-facing system that looks like it's straight out of 1985, to me, that's a problem. If you're trying to attract younger clients and you're logging into what feels like a Windows 95, you got to change it. So our main draw was to the new portal, which Onvio Documents came with. We were also promised within 2 years, Onvio Tax would be released publicly. They were beta testing it at the time that Onvio Documents was available to purchase. So I actually know a firm who switched over all of their clients to Onvio Tax in the beta testing.
How did that go?
Thompson officially killed Onvio Tax last year. So they had to convert all of the clients back to UltraTax.
Okay.
So it went well.
And I must say that in all of this time that they've been experimenting with this cloud, a lot of other products have come out, and those are the ones I'm using to solve those other problems. And I'm still on UltraTax. Now, granted, me personally, I don't go in there that much, but when I do need to go in there, It's relatively painless. There's an app. I'm on a Mac, and there's an app that I can use that it turns on a Windows system. So it's like I'm logging into a Windows system, and it's logging into some other, remote. We got a new one now. It used to be Citrix, and now it's something else that it's tapping into, and it pops open, and I'm using it. So for all I care, it's in the cloud. I don't have anything really installed except for this remote desktop software that I use. And that was always the case. Even before I had my firm, I remember I worked for another firm, and the guy had the Citrix setup. So it felt like it was the cloud at the time anyway. So it didn't seem like this promise to be able to do it. I mean, I guess there are a lot of people that are still running terminal servers for their Thomson Reuters suite. And they didn't go to the Citrix or these other solutions that I did. But there was always some other way to make it happen, to make it work, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with QuickBooks Desktop. People can still run it on a terminal server or a virtual environment, and it's like it's in the cloud, or the same idea. So you've still made do with everything. You still have a server, is that right?
No. So we're in their Thompson's virtual office platform.
Okay.
And I mean, I love UltraTax.
I bet you one of your brothers just still has a server.
No? We've all been cloud-based. However you want to define cloud. We've been able to access the programs from anywhere.
Okay. Do you have an office?
Yeah.
And you're at that office now. This is like you meet with clients there too?
Less and less. I do meet with them there. At this point, I would call us, we're a hybrid firm. We have now, soon we'll have 2 full-time employees that are fully remote. 1 employee who is hybrid in that she comes in 1 day a week, non-tax season, and she's in 2 days a week in tax season. The longtime accountant, she's in every day because her husband's retired and she doesn't want to sit at home with her husband all day. So, and then I basically
out the work, yeah.
I go in as needed. I mean, I still work better in the office than I do from home. I get distracted from home. So in tax season, I'm usually in the office 5 days a week because I know I need to get work done, and I work better in the office.
So that's a trend as well. The owner work style. If the owner wants an office because that's what they need, then the firm has an office. If the owner wants to work remotely and doesn't want to go into an office, the firm's remote. I fall somewhere in the middle. I think I want the office, but it's my team that wants to be remote, so I just don't work.
No, I mean, I'd say it's only been in the last couple of years that I quit going to the office regularly outside of tax season. Okay. And I used to be an advocate of in-office work.
You're not doing work on your boat?
I do occasionally. Like I'll take the laptop out there and I'll work from the boat on occasion. Usually,
it's good to have a Zoom call out there if you got internet.
So actually, I do a bunch of like committee and board stuff. And finally, last summer, the chair of this one committee, he told me, it's like, dude, just stop calling in. Like every time you're on these calls, you're just sitting on the dock or on the boat, and it pisses me off. Just stop calling in. I'm like, I'm still participating.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, so let's talk about another revenue stream for a firm like this, right? You're building the firm. We were talking about your growth, and you've also added wealth management, or did you guys always have this?
No, so we added wealth management, officially launched it this summer.
Okay.
We set up a separate RIA in order to do it, and we use Buckingham Strategic Partners, which is a TAMP, or a turnkey asset management provider. And basically what that is back office support. They're building model portfolios, they're assisting with the paperwork. If you've got some sort of advanced issue that you're not aware of, they have experts that you can contact to help out with that. But we're still 100% the client-facing side. I'm the advisor with them working as back office support.
So Buckingham is the product of a lot of different acquisitions, or did Buckingham always exist?
No, they were, I believe, and I might be wrong on the history, but I believe they at one point were HD Vest, which was a kind of one of the original big entrants into the CPA world. Mm-hmm. I think it was originally CPAs who started it, and they were out basically pushing the model that we're going to, where the CPAs could add the wealth management. And I forget, there was a second big player that I forget.
I've heard of a Vantax.
A Vantax is a separate one. That's another amalgamation of things. Flooring Ward was the other big one that merged.
Explain to our students how this works. What's the fee structure and what's the benefit of doing this too?
Yeah, so we charge a percentage of assets. So up to $1 million is 1%, and then it decreases from there. And we're doing the comprehensive financial planning.
And what does that mean? Percentage annually?
So it's charged quarterly. So, yeah, but it is 1% annual rate. So you'd be effectively, if you had the exact same amount of assets the entire year, you'd have 0.25% charged each quarter.
Okay.
And I mean, I think the advantage to it from the client side is that they're getting a true tax plan integrated with the financial plan, which, I mean, I believe the biggest impact we can have on financial planning is from the tax side of things and how we do those allocations. So Absolutely. I think that's the big advantage to the client. From us, I mean, the margins are better than the tax and accounting work. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, once you build up that book, you don't see financial advisors retire. They work until they're 70 because they're just maintaining that book of business.
What decisions do you make for the clients, or does Buckingham make them all for you? And so what kind of interactions do you have with the clients? How do those meetings go? What's the difference between going over a tax return and going over investments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest adjustment for me has been the emotional side of the conversations. Whereas, I mean, on the tax side of things, you do occasionally get some emotional topics. I mean, we're hearing about divorces, deaths,
which we would hear about
things
anyway
like that
as
yeah.
tax preparers, accountants.
But on the advisor side of things, or the financial advisor side of things, we tend to dive deeper because we need to understand why people want to do certain things to ensure that we build a plan that fits into it. So you do just end up with kind of a deeper emotional dive with the clients that when you're not used to that, I mean, at the end, I'm an accountant. I'm not the poster child for being able to show empathy. So it's been an adjustment for that. I think that's honestly been the biggest challenge for us. The actual work, pretty easy because we all informally do financial planning as tax advisors.
Yeah. I
mean, we're helping people with it. We're doing the technical side of things. So that hasn't really been a challenge, but the emotional side has been the learning curve.
But you can learn that skill and you can learn to care about some things that maybe would used to just brush off for you because you're just looking at the numbers, right? So, and that's probably going to be an important skill to develop just to maintain these relationships, because if it is that passive, you still have to be available for them when they need you, right? How often are you meeting with the clients that you're managing the money with? How often are you changing funds? Or like, that was the other question I had was, do you make the decisions on the funds that go into it, or is it just like a recommended path? You choose option A, B, or C, and then Buckingham does it all for you?
So ultimately, I'm responsible for the investment selection because we are an independent registered investment advisor firm. So it is my responsibility. That said, Buckingham is providing the model portfolios for a reason. I mean, it is the reason we chose Buckingham is philosophically, they align with me in that we're mainly looking at low cost ETFs and mutual funds with a tilt towards small cap and value stocks, which over the course of history, if you hold that steady, performs well. So that's why we selected them. So that being said, when I'm recommending investments, I'm recommending the portfolios that Buckingham's created. And then
who taught you this? Who taught you? Did Buckingham have classes? Did you learn on your own?
So I spent a full probably 2.5 years learning it myself from different sources before I settled on the model that I actually wanted to use. So a huge help was the AICPA does a pre-workshop before Engage, where it's 5 or 6 different CPAs who opened different models of financial planning practices. So that was where I first heard of Buckingham and kind of had a good understanding of the different models. I mean, as you know, like, CPAs are incredibly helpful to each other. So once I did that, then I just started hitting up everybody I knew or loosely knew that had gone down this path and talked to everybody under the sun to see what was good and bad about all the different models. That was the path.
So students, we've also had Shane Mason on. He's done this at his firm very successfully. They are doing extremely well with the financial planning side. And we talked about that on his episode. I don't recall the episode number, but you can check that out.
Do they still do tax work?
It's more like a byproduct. And we can have him on again and we can get an update of what they're doing now. But it's like that's kind of how they led with or they started, but now they're leading with the financial planning, and the tax stuff is like, we can do that too. But obviously it's not as profitable, and it's not, but it's still a large part of their business and a lot of core of who they are. And for you too, right? You're never going to get away from doing the taxes because that feeds it. But you also said you're selective about the clients that you're going to go after for the financial planning. So how do you market this to your client base or to a broader base?
Yeah. So, I mean, that is, we set our minimum assets to bring over. I say minimum assets as a nearing retirement is $1 million. Just from the work that we need to put into it, estimating year one, we have to commit 10 to 20 hours to that client in the first year that they onboard. Basically, from a realization standpoint, in order for me to do the wealth management, I wanted the realization to be higher than what I could spend my time on the tax and accounting side actually doing work. That's how we came up with the minimum. The second factor is below $1 million. I'm not sure how impactful we can be for the fees that we charge. Whereas once you get over $1 million, I mean, you've got some larger numbers that you can actually make significant impacts with. And then for the people not nearing retirement, it's a little bit more case specific. So for example, and we've got a young veterinarian who's might be 32, 33 years old that didn't have nearly $1 million, but fantastic client because, I mean, set up a 401k for his practice. He and his wife works. They're collectively saving $150,000 a year. They're going to be a fantastic 40-year client. So that's kind of the case specific. In terms of marketing to the existing client base, I think we have admittedly done a poor job of that. When I say we, I have done a poor job of that. We did initial outreach and followed up once, I think. So now what I've got to do this fall is actually start calling the people who express some interest individually to try to get them in. And
well, you do get them in once a year anyway, so you can make it part of your tax. Since you just started this summer, you could still make it part of the tax process. This is something that you pitch while you're doing the return, like you find some way to help them and say, here.
So that's kind of an interesting point in that I've basically the last 7 years, I tried removing myself from the tax and accounting practice as much as possible. So I have basically no interaction with them. Whereas all of a sudden, when it's time to bring this in, it's been great for me for the last 7 years, but now the clients don't know who I am. So when I'm trying to build that relationship, it's kind of like building from scratch. And we've now got a small minority of clients that actually come into the office. Everything else is done remote. So we're not getting that touch point. So
you're a victim of your other successes. You successfully exited the practice and you got some more free time back. And now that you want to do something with this free time and grow this other part of the practice, now it's going to require some more work to get ingrained back into their top of mind. And what if you had your team present it, though? What if you created some kind of system that rewarded them, the ones that are working with the clients, to where it was something that didn't require that much effort? And I'm just suggesting here.
It's something that's been in my head that I haven't figured out how to structure that.
Well, you're still early doing this. Our students would love to hear the progress of it in later years as you move on the levels at Accounting High, maybe your junior, sophomore year here. This is your freshman year, technically.
So does that mean that this is going to be a perpetual thing? You're not ending Accounting High at senior year? Did we just let the cat out of the bag? Did you just accidentally slip up?
No, I didn't. Because I'm still debating that. We may move on to Accounting U. We may. Who knows? I got one more year to figure that out. So
I thought I had my gotcha moment.
I'm still in junior year. This is junior year of Accounting High, but possibly. We'll see how it goes in the next year. You get to do a lot of things, though. You don't have to do all these things. All of this Everything that you've created is a product of what you wanted in the first place. You went out, set out to do this. You have the practice of your dreams right now. Mm-hmm. It's your imagination that created this. Now that's what you have set up. You don't have to do anything. Why are you wearing a hat that says you get to do something? What's the point of that?
Yeah, so this is from a foundation that I helped create, and am now the treasurer because, of course, as a CPA, you're always the treasurer of every nonprofit. But what this started from was a friend of mine from college. We actually were roommates after college, and I coached high school football with him. His life mantra was get to. So you don't have to do anything. You get to do it. So you don't have to go to work. You don't have to work to improve your practice. You get to do it. Like every day you wake up, it's a privilege. You don't have obstacles and opportunity, or obstacles. You have opportunities. And he, just after his 30th birthday, was killed by a drunk driver. So then in the aftermath of that, we created the GetTo Foundation. So obviously following the have to get to. And what we do is we help students in underprivileged areas get access to sports so that they have the opportunity to get to play sports. And kind of the added, there's lots of organizations that do that. So the added layer to that is we work to spread the Get To message along with that funding. So we host every year high school students. We have about 1,000 kids that come in. We have a motivational speaker that comes in to help impart that message to high school athletes. I think the best one we had was John Gordon, which if you haven't read I think it's The Energy Bus. Fantastic book. Great.
Yeah, I know that, but I know those covers. I think there's The Energy Bus, and he's done a couple of others.
Yeah.
It's clear in my head, but I don't know if I've read it. Yeah. So students, check that out. That is a good book, actually. Mm-hmm. I know I've heard of it. So that's beautiful. It's like gratitude. Like you get to bring in the gratitude, and it's also you get to impact others' lives in a meaningful way. And it's something that you're doing outside of the practice, right? I mean, you've brought in your accounting into that. You've brought in your CPA knowledge. That's what kind of afforded you that seat and helped you become part of that. But it's also something that you're honoring your friend, and you're also like, it's dope. And I saw the first iteration of the shirts or the hats. Get To looks like GetTo if it's on the same line.
That
There's
is
no
I
H.
I don't think I've got. No, I don't have one of those hats in here.
All right, so for our students listening, now the version that Matt's wearing is Get on the top and then To right below it. So you get to. Matt, thanks for joining us today. Like I said earlier, you're the pig with the house made of bricks because you're building a solid foundation with your firm. You're growing it, and you're going to, quote unquote, organically get to $1 million without another acquisition, hopefully within the next year or two. Not hopefully. I mean, that could be an aspiration for you. I mean, that's like usually everybody wants to get to $1 million. That's usually the first big milestone of growing a firm.
Yeah, that can be a separate debate. Because like we've been peddling the $1 million firm since the 90s.
Is that not the case anymore? Because $1 million now is like 400,000 in the 90s.
Yeah, like that's my thing. Is like we're still pushing this $1 million firm, and I was like, it was impressive in 1990. Now it's just like,
yeah, actually, fair point. Very fair point.
Yeah, we should have like the $2.3 million firm.
Although you're still not quite there yet, so maybe you're just knocking it until you try it. Once you get to $1 million, it might be a sense of accomplishment. But you think, comparatively speaking, 2.3 million now is as hard as getting to $1 million was in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Probably a lot harder in the 90s because you were just dealing with geography. You didn't have the ability to grow nationally,
and I
like
mean,
you do now.
Actually, that would be a whole interesting. I wonder how margins have changed on accounting firms from the 90s to today. Because, I mean, so much is automated, but also your software costs have skyrocketed. So I don't know how. I'd be curious.
So, yeah, I mean, also because we're offshoring. So our labor has slightly adjusted, but it used to be a lot less anyway because you need to pay people in the U.S. a whole lot more. And even distributed teams, people without an office, without rent, and without all of those supplies, have filled that with other amenities or other software costs or other things that you have to add on. So then at the end of the day, that's a wash too, or you're paying your people more. So I would be very interested to study that and look into what margins were back then versus now. I have a feeling that at the end of the day, it's the same because you get what you put in. And like I said earlier, you have your dream firm. So if you want your margins higher, then raise your prices and make the changes that you need to make, or cut costs. You're probably wasting money in some areas. Most accountants don't waste money, though. That's the one thing that more accountants I talk to, the more I find they are like me. And I am very frugal when it comes to waste, especially in business, in life and in business. And the more accountants I meet, more business owners, I thought everybody was just like our business owner clients and just frivolous, just spending money here and there, running out of money, not knowing what to do, cash flow problems, all kinds of things. You've seen it too with entrepreneurs, small business owners, and accountants are, we are the ones that are the responsible ones. We can help you get your stuff back inside. So I have a feeling my prediction would be that the margins were probably similar because we can control a lot of those factors. But
I feel like accountants are frugal in all of the little things, but then like their low level frugality will just like, they'll decide one day that they want to buy a new tractor and they'll just go out and buy a $40,000 tractor because they can.
You've just described me. I didn't buy a tractor, but I've done that plenty of times.
I mean, I've done it with boats multiple times.
Yeah. Fair. So what's that level of frugality? The accountant frugality? What's the phrase there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would help with our branding issue that the AICPA is pushing if we run this frugality campaign.
All right, we won't go there, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll see you in future years here at Accounting High if we go beyond our senior year here. Yeah.
Well, we'll see if I graduate. I think, do I have to cross over the $1 million to get to sophomore year, or do I have to repeat freshman year?
That's part of that's part of graduation.
It's the final exam.
We'll figure that out. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Peace out. Class dismissed.